You're listening to a Get Abstract summary of The Person You Mean to Be, a book by Dolly Chugh. Most people want to be good people, yet often being seen as a good person can become more important than actually being a good person. When this happens, your efforts to make a positive difference in the world can backfire. At a time when inclusion and diversity have become mainstream topics, social psychologist Dolly Chugh demonstrates how uncovering your hidden motives and adopting a growth mindset will help you act as a builder rather than just a believer in the fight against discrimination and inequality. The first takeaway is you need a growth mindset to thrive in situations that threaten your identity. Research shows that the way you see yourself, your identity, directs your actions more than any particular set of values. Consequently, your brain considers any behavior that contradicts your sense of identity as a self-threat and tries to find ways to dismiss, ignore, or justify it. This is particularly true if you consider yourself to be a good person. To see yourself more clearly, think of yourself as someone who is trying to be better instead. This allows you to move from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, which opens you up to learning. If you have a fixed mindset, you'll perceive criticism, anger, or pushback as a threat. Your brain will switch immediately into defensive mode and dismiss criticism. You don't learn. In contrast, if you have a growth mindset, you are likely to embrace information that will help you understand the reasons that might have caused the criticism or anger. Notably, situations where psychological safety is low, where people feel they will face shame or punishment for expressing innovative ideas, asking questions, or needing help, are more likely to nurture fixed mindsets. If you have a fixed mindset, you are likely to worry constantly that you might do or say the wrong thing, which threatens your identity. This focuses your attention on yourself instead of the problem you are trying to solve or the person you are trying to support. A fixed mindset also prevents you from learning from your mistakes, as you are likely to deny you have made an error in the first place. If, for example, someone tells you that they feel a comment you made was racist, don't become defensive. Consider the possibility that despite your best intentions, you might indeed have blundered and ask for more information. The second takeaway is every person has unconscious biases, even those who actively advocate and support diversity and equality. The human brain processes almost all the information and data it receives at an unconscious level using mental shortcuts. This means that people's explicit and implicit beliefs can differ significantly. For example, you may be aware of diversity and equality issues and work to fight them, but you still might unconsciously associate women with family and home instead of career and work. Such unconscious associations sometimes translate into behavior that is unintentionally racist or sexist. A good first step to combat unconscious bias is to take an online implicit association test, IAT. The results of this test will give you a starting point for thinking about how your unconscious biases might affect your everyday decision-making, behavior, and interactions with others at work and in your social circles. The third takeaway is you can fight inequality more effectively by tackling systemic biases as well as individual ones. Your identity will put you at a systemic advantage or disadvantage. Being white, for example, immediately provides you with a number of privileges that will make your life easier compared to that of a black person, whether that means feeling at home in certain neighborhoods, trusting the police to protect you and your family, or more mundane advantages such as having a choice of bandages that match your skin tone. These privileges are invisible, but work like tailwinds that enable an airplane to reach its destination more quickly. In the same way, systemic headwinds make it much harder or even impossible for someone from another demographic group to reach the same destination. Inequality is the result of systemic disadvantages that have accumulated over decades, and the existence of head and tailwinds mean that equality does not necessarily result in equity. People of color, for example, might not achieve the same social status as a white person, even though they put in the same amount of, if not more, work trying to get there. The fourth takeaway is people's bounded awareness means that they might not see things that contradict their worldview. To fight inequality, you need to notice it in the first place. Because of confirmation bias, you usually only see whatever confirms your view of reality. Your brain tends to ignore any data or information that might challenge or contradict your worldview and instead seeks out evidence that supports your preconceptions. Most people, therefore, live in echo chambers, where they mix with and seek the opinions of people who are very similar to them. For example, a study found that the network of the average white person is only 1% black. This bounded awareness grows even more pronounced when people move into a position of control or power or become wealthier. This phenomenon links to the meritocracy narrative, the widely held belief that all people, irrespective of race, gender, belief, or class, can achieve whatever they set their mind to if they only work hard enough. People want to believe that they reached a position of power or wealth because of their own hard work, and not because of some innate privilege. On the flip side, this meritocracy belief will reinforce people's view that a less privileged person has failed to achieve anything because they are lazy or less intelligent. To overcome confirmation bias and bounded awareness, you need to listen to the experiences of those from marginalized groups and resist the urge to argue your own viewpoint. The fifth takeaway is people who make discriminatory remarks will often respond more favorably if people from a privileged background call them out, rather than the person from the discriminated group. Every person has ordinary privileges. These are elements of your identity that you tend not to think about. For example, white people won't think much about their skin color, and able-bodied people usually don't consider the privilege of being able to walk or see. Research has found that perpetrators of discriminatory behavior tend to respond better when someone with a lot of ordinary privileges confronts them about it instead of someone from the target group. This means that a white male will often be more effective when speaking up against racism than a black woman or man. The sixth takeaway is moving from willful ignorance to willful awareness takes intentional effort. Becoming willfully aware of your ordinary privileges and biases requires a concerted effort to listen and not to shy away from the feelings of self-threat and pain caused by the realization that you might not be as tolerant or colorblind as you always thought you were. Research suggests that the more deeply you care about a cause, the less likely you'll seek information that might generate a moral conflict. For example, if you feel deeply concerned about child labor and fair wages, you are less likely to dig deep into the ethical practices of your favorite shoe manufacturer. To overcome this natural reflex of self-protection, you need to adopt a growth mindset and be willing to learn. Reverse mentoring, where a younger person mentors an older one, is a good way to open yourself to new and different perspectives. The seventh takeaway is going into savior, sympathy, tolerance, or typecasting mode is counterproductive to fighting bias. Your mind instantly categorizes people in terms of how similar they are to you. This categorization determines how you interact with them. If you perceive them as other than you, it's likely that you will base your behavior on stereotypes. There are 4 modes of behavior that otherize people. The first one, savior mode, comes into play when you want to help someone. Coming to someone's rescue gives you a warm glow effect, meaning that the act can become more about you than about the other person, which in turn may lead to alienation. Sympathy mode creates distance between you and the other person, because while you sympathize with their problems, you do not empathize with them. If people realize you support them because you feel sorry for them, their self-esteem and motivation are likely to suffer. Tolerance mode can cause problems for two reasons. One, it suggests that you see the other person as a foreign body that you have to put up with. Second, tolerance often manifests in what people call color blindness, the pretense that you don't notice someone's skin color. Color blindness denies the reality experienced by people of color and the systemic advantages and disadvantages of belonging to a particular demographic group. Typecasting, or positive stereotyping, prevents you from seeing the other person as an individual. You are likely to overlook skills and behaviors that fall outside the scope of the stereotype, or even penalize them for displaying these skills and behaviors. For example, the female typecast suggests that all women are nurturing and great with children. If a man is great with children, parents might meet him with distrust. And if a woman finds more fulfillment in her career than in spending time with children, people might form a negative view of her. The eighth takeaway is, to make inclusivity a reality, you need to be a builder. Diversity happens at gateways if decision-makers choose to admit people from every race and gender to a particular group. Usually, only a few people have control over these gateways. Inclusion, on the other hand, is about helping people on the path to and from these gateways, and is something that everyone can do. Being inclusive requires you to move from just paying lip service to diversity to building inclusion into your day-to-day behavior. For example, be mindful of exclusive behavior at work and in meetings. Take note of who sits where, who speaks, and which people can speak without interruption. If you can, change the seating arrangements. Make sure you get everyone to contribute and listen actively to what people have to say. Another effective means of becoming a builder is to steer the conversation. Be aware of the narratives that underlie your conversations, the media you consume, your parenting, and your social media presence. See if the voices within those narratives are diverse and whether they display confirmation or unconscious biases. When you notice a lack of inclusion and diversity, try to address the problem instead of staying silent. The ninth takeaway is, when confronting prejudice and discrimination, apply the 20-60-20 rule. To become a builder of inclusivity, you will need to speak up when you see discrimination, even if it feels uncomfortable or risky. In these situations, the 20-60-20 rule can be useful. The rule suggests that people generally divide into the easy 20, people who are open and willing to learn, the stuck 20, those who refuse to listen and change their point of view, and the middle 60, those who are mostly silent, passive, and easily influenced by social norms. Understand which group the person you are confronting falls into regarding this particular issue to determine why, how, where, and when you engage with them. When you are talking to an easy 20, give them facts and stories. The middle 60s tend to respond best to stories and emotional connections. And when you encounter a stuck 20, anything you say should be for the benefit of any middle 60s who might be watching and listening. Meaningful support can take many forms, but above all, it requires the will to engage. When you become a builder, you'll feel uncomfortable at times, and you may occasionally say or do the wrong thing. Avoid the temptation to make the fight for inclusion about yourself. Be ready to learn from and to stand alongside the victims of discrimination and those who are trying to effect change.